Welcome to TradeTheMBA.com. This is John's reports for the 18th of June, and well, the rhetoric getting far ahead of where reality is, and the market kind of at first was sort of okay with things, but then the Iranians hyped up their comments by saying that the world would know for centuries what they're about to do tonight. Well, that hasn't happened, so that's why the market right now is green because it's like, okay, well, now you got Trump saying we know where the leader is, we're not killing him yet, and strange happenings. But I think that the bigger picture is they're starting to recognize that some of this is jawboning, not wanting to show your hand, but try and pretend that you're the toughest guy on the block. And the market's not used to that kind of diplomacy, if you want to call it that. It's just a different approach, and the idea is to strong arm and convince them to, at least the Iranians, to come to the table. And of course, you send a bunch of aircraft carriers. It's the Teddy Roosevelt construct all over, only in modern times, where you report things instantaneously. We can see that we had the start of shorts, but so far this morning, not really continuing. Now, if that does start progressing during the day, you've got everything that you need for a pullback. But look at how well this has handled this within still at the 6,000 level. We didn't even come close to the 76% return. So, for all things being equal, as dire as everyone's made it out to be, at the end of the day, it hasn't become catastrophic. Now, that doesn't mean that there are obstacles on the horizon. Of course, the Nasdaq, when we look at it, um, faring about the same, and that was about a 50% move into the previous up rally, but stronger readings here, well above the 25 for the magenta. Of course, that could drop intraday, but we'll just keep an eye on it. And we did get an inversion here beginning between DOC cyan and green, and you really want to see that positive aspect. But of course, we get the Fed, who's going to come out with their comments, and won't that change everything? Because the Fed has been so active in wanting to control the narrative, and you can tell by this last several weeks of nothingness, where Trump complains about them, and they're like, "Yeah, we still think inflation is coming," and it makes no sense because at the end of the day, you keep looking at each of the different sectors of the economy, and we can see it by region. And we talked about this yesterday. The whole point of the deportations is it reduces the strain on goods and services. That is deflationary, and anyone who even took economics 101 should understand this construct. um, Most of the inflation that Biden created was the fact that you started bringing in so many more people than the resources that existed could handle, and that was inflationary. Yeah, nobody wants to talk about that because it's not politically correct to discuss it, but that is the narrative of exactly what happened uh, broadly with inflation. And then you threw in all of the other uh, metrics with the Ukraine war and reducing drilling and more restrictions, and it just made it even worse. So it was a compounding error on top of error. And of course, they couldn't see any correlation between. I think it just spelled it out pretty clearly, but they couldn't see it. But this is a problem because, again, this fear aspect, this is all fair trade, has nothing to do with actual demand or supply in this particular case. Now, if you persist and nothing changes, you're going to have a serious glut of excess oil sitting around. And what is that going to do to price? So that could be an interesting one. This was sort of the collapse that we started to see back here when all of a sudden they saw inventories and that rising faster than the demand was. But they also see now that you also have an improved economic situation, more activity, and that's put a strain on things. You throw in the potential of blocking activity in the Straits of Hormuz or any other kind of broadening scale of conflict, and of course that fear is beautifully displayed here in oil. And I would expect it to continue to trade off if we don't get any new actual events, because at the end of the day, when people hold back on their purchases, that's going they can only store so much, so many places, and that becomes a problem. And you certainly aren't going to get the strategic reserve being filled at these levels and that, because Trump just isn't going to do that. So And that's an interesting one because that becomes the floor. The federal government really will set the floor for oil if things start to decline, where you have too much excess, because they'll just eat it up as part of their reserve, and that's what they did last time when prices dipped a little bit further than they wanted. From a euro standpoint, again, they meet at their G7, nothing happens, and none of them were in agreement. Obviously, Europe is going to go their own way with the Ukraine conflict. U.S. is stepping out of it, somehow stepping into the Middle East situation, but I don't see that as being more of a conflict. I think it's just more of the way Trump handles diplomacy, where he wants to force them to come to the realization that yes, we could destroy them. Are we going to? That would be rather odd to see happen, but you have to make them believe that you would. And that's where that uncertainty principle and chaos theory comes into play. And Trump loves that because he's a negotiator. And if you grasp that, you're not going to get panicked over some of these things. From a gold standpoint, though, it does pose a difficult situation because you have deflationary everywhere, but you also have conflict. So it becomes a broader one. This is the same issue you're going to get with Bitcoin and your cryptos here. They traded pretty much a little bit excess to what the Nasdaq did, and we get that from their beta just being larger, but it'll also return faster. It was a complete dip here of the MBI white from that standpoint, so the pressure on the short side has been removed. It's a question of whether the new buyers come in and turn that around. So pretty much strong spike, but again, think about where you're talking about. You're still at the 76% on these. So this isn't what you would call a correction or anything like that. It's just normal fluctuation within the broader range. The ETH also, say 76%. This is consolidation period is basically what we've got. When you look at it broadly from there, we haven't taken out anything below the previous lows coming down here and just trading in a middle range of it. And it gets pretty clear. I mean, you ended up here above 50%, MBI white leading. Magenta was still above. As soon as it crossed below 25, that's you're looking for a move towards the zero, but in this case, you're above 50%, so you got to look to the 50% and see where things go for the 50%. And it was looking pretty weak, and then you had Magenta move over, and that ends the expectation that you're going to move to the zero. But now you see the zero is already starting to rise, so it's not going to take much of a dip down for eventually us to reach the zero, which will satisfy it. It'll probably end up being equivalent to where this 50% range is, and we'll see how it plays out. But intraday, there was still plenty of optimism, but again, that call buying all hit with brutality. And then you have too many puts coming into this situation. So they're setting them up for what? Yeah, killing all the gamma on puts with the rise, and the market will open up marginally higher, barring any new developments. But again, I think we're going to hear a lot of jawboning, and there may have to be some kind of simulate. Of course, the Israelis are claiming that they were able to destroy more of the Iranian structure. This gets to a question where if the Iranians realize they haven't, it wouldn't be a bad move for them to reach some level of an agreement, because it would still preserve their ability to return everything without too much delay. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's been going on since the mid 90s. Keep that perspective, so it's not going to end anytime soon. It's just more of the geopolitics that takes place around the world always. But as always, anything relevant, I'll put it on the team chat for us. Have a good one. Trade well.